Hello, everyone. My name is Yasmin, and today I want to share a story that changed my life forever. It is the story of my first night as a married woman. When people hear those words, they often imagine romance, excitement, and happiness. They imagine a perfect moment where everything feels magical. But for me, that night was something much deeper. It was not about perfection. It was about trust, understanding, kindness, and the beginning of a relationship that would slowly grow into real love. I grew up in a small town where life moved slowly. Everyone knew each other, and news traveled faster than the wind. My family was simple, hardworking, and close. My father owned a small grocery store, and my mother spent most of her time caring for our home. I was the oldest daughter, so I often helped my parents and looked after my younger siblings. Like many young girls, I spent years dreaming about my future. Sometimes I imagined my wedding day while helping my mother prepare dinner. Other times I would sit by my bedroom window at night and wonder who my husband would be. Would he be kind? Would he make me laugh? Would he understand me? These questions followed me throughout my teenage years. As I grew older, my dreams became mixed with fears. Friends shared stories about marriage. Cousins offered advice. Some stories were beautiful and encouraging, while others filled me with anxiety. Everyone seemed to have a different opinion about what married life would be like. The more stories I heard, the more nervous I became. Whenever the topic of marriage came up, I would smile politely, but deep inside, I worried about the future. I knew that one day I would leave my parents' home and begin a new life. The thought excited me, but it also frightened me. Leaving behind everything familiar felt like standing at the edge of a cliff and preparing to jump into the unknown. Then, when I was 17 years old, my family introduced me to a young man named Kareem. Kareem was respectful, calm, and thoughtful. During our first conversation, I noticed that he listened carefully before speaking. He never interrupted me or tried to impress me with grand stories. Instead, he asked simple questions and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. Over the following months, our families met several times. Kareem and I had opportunities to talk under family supervision and learn more about each other. Although we were still far from knowing everything about one another, I felt comfortable speaking with him. There was something reassuring about his personality. Eventually, our families agreed on the marriage and preparations began. The months leading up to the wedding passed quickly. Every week seemed busier than the one before. My mother and sisters spent hours discussing decorations, dresses, invitations, and food. Relatives called constantly to offer advice and suggestions. Some days I felt excited, other days I felt overwhelmed. As the wedding approached, my emotions became stronger. During quiet moments, I found myself wondering what my life would be like after marriage. Would I be a good wife? Would I adjust to my new home? Would Kareem and I be happy together? The night before the wedding, I could hardly sleep. My mind was filled with questions. I kept staring at the ceiling and imagining the future. Every possible scenario seemed to play inside my head. When morning finally arrived, the house exploded with activity. Relatives arrived early, friends filled every room with laughter and conversation, music played in the background. My sisters rushed from one room to another carrying dresses, makeup, and decorations. Everyone seemed happy except me. Not because I didn't want to be married, I did, but because I knew that this day would change everything. As I sat in front of the mirror while preparations continued around me, I suddenly realized that I would soon leave the home where I had spent my entire life. The thought hit me harder than I expected. The walls of that house held thousands of memories. I had learned to walk there. I had celebrated birthdays there. I had laughed, cried, studied, and dreamed there. Soon it would no longer be my home. For a moment, tears filled my eyes. My mother noticed immediately. She sat beside me and gently held my hand. "Why are you crying?" she asked softly. I laughed through my tears. "I don't know. Maybe because everything is changing." She smiled and squeezed my hand. "My daughter, change is part of life. Today, you're not losing a family, you're gaining another one." Her words comforted me, but the sadness remained. The wedding ceremony itself felt like a dream. There were smiles everywhere, cameras flashing constantly, and endless congratulations from relatives and friends. People hugged me, wished me happiness, and shared their excitement, yet everything happened so quickly that I barely had time to process it. Before I knew it, the celebration was ending. The most difficult moment came when it was time to leave my parents' house. My father hugged me tightly. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, "You will always be my little girl." That sentence nearly broke my heart. I hugged him again, trying not to cry. My mother was already wiping tears from her eyes. My younger siblings stood nearby, looking emotional. Leaving them was one of the hardest things I had ever done. As Kareem and I drove toward his family's house, I stared out the window quietly. The streets looked familiar, but everything felt different. It was as if my entire world had shifted in a single day. Kareem noticed my silence. "Nervous?" he asked gently. I smiled. "A little." He laughed softly. "Good, because I'm nervous too." His answer surprised me. "You are?" "Of course, my life is changing too." For some reason, hearing that made me feel better. I had been so focused on my own emotions that I had forgotten he was experiencing a major life change as well. When we arrived at his home, his family welcomed me warmly. They treated me with kindness and respect. Everyone seemed eager to help me feel comfortable. The evening continued with more celebrations, conversations, and guests. Eventually, however, people began leaving. The house grew quieter. The noise faded. Little by little, reality began sinking in. Soon, I would be alone with Kareem. My heart started beating faster. All the fears I had carried for years suddenly returned. What if things felt awkward? What if we didn't know what to say? What if I embarrassed myself? What if everything became uncomfortable? The questions raced through my mind. Finally, one of the women in the family guided me to the room that Kareem and I would share. The room was beautiful. Fresh flowers decorated the space, soft lights created a peaceful atmosphere. Everything looked elegant and welcoming, yet none of those details helped calm my nerves. I sat quietly on the edge of the bed, staring at my hands. The house outside had become silent. For the first time all day, I was completely alone. The silence felt almost overwhelming. My heart pounded in my chest. I could hear every small sound, every creak, every footstep, every movement. Minutes felt like hours. Then I heard the door open. My entire body became tense. Kareem entered slowly and closed the door behind him. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of immediately sitting beside me, he walked to a chair across the room and sat down. The gesture surprised me. He smiled awkwardly. "I think we're both nervous." I couldn't help laughing. The tension immediately became lighter. "Maybe a little," I admitted. "A little?" he replied. "I've probably rehearsed this moment 100 times in my head." That made me laugh again. The more we talked, the more relaxed I felt. Rather than focusing on the fact that it was our wedding night, Kareem simply treated it like a normal conversation between two people trying to get to know each other better. He asked about my childhood memories. I asked about his school years. We shared funny stories. We talked about our families. We even discussed embarrassing moments from the wedding day. At one point, he accidentally knocked over a glass of water and nearly spilled it on himself. We both laughed so hard that tears appeared in our eyes. That simple moment changed everything. The fear I had carried all day began disappearing. The room no longer felt intimidating. Instead, it felt peaceful. As the conversation continued, I realized something important. Kareem wasn't trying to impress me. He wasn't pretending to be perfect. He openly admitted his fears, his mistakes, and his insecurities. That honesty made me trust him. Hours passed surprisingly quickly. We discussed our dreams for the future. Kareem told me he hoped to open his own business one day. I shared my dream of continuing my education and becoming a teacher. Rather than dismissing my goals, he encouraged them. "I think you'd be an excellent teacher," he said. His support meant more than he probably realized. Many people had opinions about what a married woman should do with her life, yet here was my husband encouraging my ambitions instead of limiting them. The conversation eventually became more serious. We talked about marriage itself. We discussed responsibilities. We talked about communication and respect. We spoke honestly about our hopes and worries. Then Kareem said something I will never forget. "Yasmin, I know today has been overwhelming. I want you to know something important. We don't need to rush anything. We have years ahead of us. Tonight doesn't need to be perfect." His words touched me deeply. For years, I had heard people speak about weddings as if everything depended on a single night. There was so much pressure surrounding the idea. Yet Kareem saw things differently. To him, marriage was not about one night, it was about a lifetime. That perspective changed the way I viewed everything. As the hours passed, my nervousness slowly transformed into comfort. I found myself enjoying the conversation. I enjoyed learning about the person I had married. The truth is that real relationships are not built through grand romantic gestures alone. They are built through conversations, through honesty, through patience, through understanding. That night taught me this lesson better than any book ever could. At one point, we started talking about our childhood dreams. Kareem confessed that when he was 10 years old, he wanted to become a famous football player. I laughed. "What happened?" He shrugged dramatically. "Reality." We both laughed again. The more we laughed together, the easier everything became. I began seeing him not just as my husband, but as a friend, someone I genuinely enjoyed spending time with, someone I could trust, someone who made me feel safe. Eventually, the clock showed that it was very late. We had spent hours talking without realizing it. Both of us were exhausted. After all, it had been one of the busiest days of our lives. Before we finally went to sleep, Kareem looked at me and smiled. "You know something?" "What?" I asked. "I'm really glad it's you." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Then I smiled. "I'm glad it's you too." Those simple words carried more meaning than any grand speech. The next morning, sunlight filled the room. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. Then I remembered. I was married. I was in my new home. A new chapter had officially begun. Surprisingly, I felt calm. The fear that had haunted me for years was gone. In its place was hope. Not because everything was suddenly perfect, not because all my questions had been answered, but because I knew I was not facing the future alone. Over the months that followed, Kareem and I continued learning about each other. We discovered habits that made us laugh. We learned how to solve disagreements respectfully. We supported each other through challenges. Marriage, I learned, is not a destination. It is a journey. Every day teaches you something new. Every experience helps you grow. Years later, when people ask me about my wedding day, they often expect me to talk about the dress, the decorations, or the photographs. And yes, those things were beautiful, but they are not what I remember most. What I remember most is sitting in that quiet room with a man who chose patience over pressure, understanding over expectations, and kindness over pride. That is the memory that stayed with me. That is the memory that mattered. If there is one message I want every young woman listening to this story to remember, it is this: do not let fear steal your happiness. The future will always contain unknowns, but not every unknown thing is frightening. Sometimes the things we fear most become the beginning of something beautiful. And to every man listening, remember that kindness is powerful, respect is powerful, patience is powerful. The way you make someone feel matters far more than any grand gesture ever could. True love is not built in a single moment. It is built one conversation at a time, one act of kindness at a time, one day at a time. When I look back now, I do not remember my first night because it was perfect. I remember it because it was real. Two nervous people entered a new chapter together and discovered that trust is stronger than fear. That was the beginning of our story, and even today, I remain grateful for that beautiful beginning. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this English story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories that help you improve your English while enjoying meaningful life lessons. See you in the next story.